All right, so this is the back end of Adobe. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you might have avoided it like the plague for the last 2 years. But the way that you get here is just by going to volkswagenacademy.adobeconnect.com. And once you put in your login, it'll show you something like this. Usually it'll show either a calendar view, your meetings, your recordings, if you have any. And there's really not too much that you do from this screen. You could hit the create button from here, but usually I always end up going to either my meetings to create a new one. But just to explore really quick the tabs up at the top, my account on Adobe I might have a few extra options that you might not show up on the top because Darren and I are in as administrators. I don't think that most of you are administrators because we only have a certain number of accounts. So you probably don't have this tab. Don't worry, you don't need to be an administrator to create a room. So the first tab that you'll see is content. Now, under each tab, there's always these subcategories. So there's shared content, there's user content, where you could go into all of the users that are in Adobe, and I could actually look and see Kevin's content if I wanted to, right? Like Kevin has a Rutan video in there that I could access if I wanted to. Then you have your content, and these are all of the files that you've uploaded to your side. And then there is this content dashboard, and I couldn't even tell you what it does. It's just a graph with some really weird stuff on it, so who knows? It's actually a pretty good video, Rich. Rich was asking about your Rutan video there, Kevin. It's like, Rutan?
Yeah, it's a really good walk around video that I use to show participants what a good presentation looks like.
It's a good one.
Before they
All right.
before they do their own videos. Let me show you what a good one looks like.
Awesome. So then you have the meetings tab, and again, you see shared meetings, user meetings, and my meetings. Now, under shared meetings is where you'll find all of the meetings that already exist. So all of our meetings for the sales team, you'll find in this, I know it's kind of small, in this DLTs folder. And then you go into sales, and this is where all of our stuff lives. Either it's a VEST class, you got your coaching rooms, delivery rooms, foundation rooms, product rooms, all live in here. Same with any of our launch trainings. We've got all the delivery obsessed rooms, ID4, STVW, TAUS, everything all lives under shared meetings. Now, you can also have user meetings where, let's say somebody created their own meeting. Let's say Eric did. I know he didn't, but if he did, it would be under here. And then you have your meetings, right? All the meetings that you've created. And one thing you'll notice under all of these, whether it's user meetings, my meetings, or shared meetings, there's usually a folder called templates. And I'll get into templates are and how to use them a little bit later. But just know that, for example, when I have to create 8 different versions of Foundation Day 1, that doesn't mean that I have to create the same thing 8 times individually, right? You can create a template and then create a copy of each room 8 times. So I'll show you guys how to do that in a little bit. But let's start with just creating a new meeting. So you can hit this new meeting button here. And every time you create a meeting, you're going to have these exact same options. There's a couple things that are super important. Now, the name of the meeting, you can rename a meeting. This you can change later if, maybe you decided that might not be the best name for the meeting, or maybe you had a typo or something. But let's just call this the leads test meeting. Whoops, there's 3 E's. Okay. So the URL is what's super important. You cannot change the URL once the meeting has been created. Now, you could delete whatever meeting used that URL and create a new one with the same link, but you cannot change the URL. So make sure that it is exactly the way that you want it to show, because you can't change it later. So we'll do the same thing. Now, if you don't put anything in here, it's just going to auto-generate some random letters and numbers at the end of the URL here. Not the worst case scenario if it happens, but I always like to try to keep it something simple, just in case anyone actually have ever had to physically type it in, because sometimes you can't copy and paste. All right, so the start time is kind of irrelevant because the way that we use these meetings, we will continue to use the same meeting room over and over again at multiple different times. This is kind of designed to, let's say, it's set up so that if you only used a meeting once, you could send out invitations and it would show the start time and all that. But I just generally don't even bother changing that stuff. Duration, again, it really doesn't matter, but I just always change it anyway. And if I'm starting a meeting from scratch, I'm just going to use this default template because I'm just going to change it all completely anyway. So that's what we'll use for now. But as I mentioned before, if you already have templates made, you could use a pre-existing template to create your next room. So for the sake of today, we'll just start with a blank one, but I'll show you guys eventually how to create a new meeting from a template. All right, language will stay the same. As far as it comes with access, we typically want to always use the default, which is accepted guests may enter the room, which means that when someone puts in the URL and they're a guest, right, they're joining as a guest, they have to be admitted into the room. You could set it up that anyone who has the URL can automatically enter the room, but that is absolute chaos and I don't recommend it. And account members may enter the room. I usually just leave it off because I'll show you there's a way that you can make sure that certain people have access as opposed to everybody, right? We might not want everyone who has a Volkswagen Adobe login to automatically be a host. We'll get to that later. And as far as audio conference settings goes, as of lately, we've just been using voice over IP. We haven't been messing around with any of the audio conferencing systems like Meeting One because we had so many challenges with those. Now, maybe there's opportunity. We might change it out in the future. Who knows? But for right now, you can just put do not include any audio conferencing with this meeting. And that's what we've been doing for that. So those are the main things when you're first creating a meeting. Pick a name for the meeting, and this is what's going to show up on like the top left when people enter into the room. So this will actually show up in the room itself. The URL, make sure you get it right the way that you want it because you can't change it later. If you're creating a room from a template, make sure you pick the right template. Otherwise, you can just use the default. Accepted guests may enter. This enhanced audio video experience, this button will only be here for another 2 weeks because once our account is upgraded, they're doing a big update to Adobe to, what version is it? I think it's 11 something. This is just going to be included. It's not going to be beta anymore. So just forget that exists. It'll be gone in 2 weeks. All right. So once you've got all that sorted out, the next step is determining who is a host. Yeah, Rich, you can just keep ignoring it. I know it keeps popping up in all the rooms. It's going to go away in 2 weeks. Just keep ignoring it. All right. So when it comes to adding hosts to the room, You can actually go through and select the hosts. So, if I only want Eric and I to have access as hosts to this room, I could change those permissions. Now, what I do for simplicity's sake is I created a group here called Volkswagen Sales Instructors, and that is pretty self-explanatory, right? It includes all of us Volkswagen sales instructors, so that way you don't have to add each person individually. It'll just make sure that all of us have access as hosts to all of our rooms. So in case somebody ever had to sub for somebody, or we had to switch room numbers around, you don't have to worry about making sure people have access. But occasionally, sometimes, people might get forgotten, or maybe I miss a step, and then someone calls me up and is like, hey, I can't get in as a host to this room. I don't know what's up. Usually that's what it is. It's just the permissions here, and I'll show you how to change it later if you messed it up. And then the final step is a step that we don't use, but I'm sure you guys have all been on the receiving end sometimes when I forget to switch this box to don't send invitations. Otherwise, anyone who's listed as a host on that meeting will get an invitation. So you want to hit do not send invitations and then hit finish. And before I open up the room and show you what we did, who has questions? I saw Tiffany's typing, but you can finish typing or you can just say it. It's faster.
I was just saying that explains it. Sometimes the random invitations.
Yes. Usually that's me at the end of a very long day, and I miss that step. So.
Hey, Savannah. This is Kevin.
Yeah.
May be the right or wrong time for this. When people show up late and, that message pops up that we're able to decline with a message. If they're just typing in a link or what have you, how is that message supposed to get to them?
Yep. So that message will show, you know what? It might be easier to show you, but you know how there's a landing page that they get to, right?
Yes.
The message will show up on that landing page. So it'll say something like waiting for host to accept you. And then once you send that message, it'll refresh and it'll say like, you've been denied, or I don't know exactly what it says. I'd have to look at it, but,
right.
And it'll show that message on that landing page.
Okay. But if and if you decline them and they jump back in, does it still allow you to decline them and send that message as well?
It should.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no limit.
All right. Okay, thank you. I was just curious when you were talking about the messages and stuff.
Permissions, yeah. So, like I said, once you've created a meeting, you can go back in and edit a few things. So, again, if we want to change the name of the meeting, we can't change the URL, but we can change the access. We can change the audio conference settings. We can also edit and change participants. So let's say right now, right, this is a meeting with us, the leads. I can go through and only put the leads on here. So we've got Kevin. We've got Kimberly. We've got Richley. We've got Tim Mancuso. And where's Tiffany? Did I miss Tiffany? There you are, Tiffany. Okay. So all of you right now are as participants. I want to make you hosts. And that's how easy it is. Now, there is, like I said, there is the option to send invitations through Adobe, but we never use it. And then you can upload content to the meeting itself, but that is not my preferred method of uploading content. I'll show you that in a moment. But this is also where, once you've created the meeting, where you will access any recordings for that meeting, as well as any reports for that meeting. And that would show you, who attended the session, how many sessions were started, and if there were any polls, how those questions were answered. So, all right, now that we've created a meeting, all those steps seem pretty simple enough, I hope. If you have any questions, just let me know. And I will send you guys, there is a little user guide on Adobe. I'll send it to you so you have it. All right, let's see. Hey, it loaded pretty fast on the VPN today. Usually it's super slow. Okay, so this is a brand new meeting, right? There's nothing in here. These are just the default settings. You don't have to join in Adobe. You could just watch the screen share, even though Kevin's there. Thanks, Kevin. So couple things. I'm just going to delete these layouts because we're not going to use them anyway, but I want to show you guys kind of how to create a layout. Yes, my pulse is working today. Kimberly and I were texting yesterday, and I told her I was having a problem with my pulse, and she thought I meant that I was ill. Worried I was okay. I was like, no, my pulse secure. All right. So to create a new layout, you just hit this little button, and you can create a brand new layout, or if you had existing layouts, you could duplicate one. So we'll create one in a second. I do want to hop in, though, to preferences and show you guys, we're just starting from scratch. It's a brand new room. There's nothing loaded in here. One of the first things I like to do is upload a background. Now, you can upload directly from your computer, and I'll show you how that looks, right? You can upload an image directly from the computer, or you could have it already saved in the back end. I'll show that later, but just for the sake of this part, we'll just use it simply. All right, so we've got an image in the background. There is an option to show the host cursor. We've never really used it. Sometimes it's more confusing than anything else, so we've kind of always left it off, but there is an option. So attendees could see where your mouse is at all times, or just when using a whiteboard, or only the other hosts can see the mic, or your little mouse moving around the screen. So I always default off, but there's also an option to remind you to start recording the session. This would show up at the start of every meeting, which is why we usually have it turned off, because you're probably not going to be recording every meeting. And allow attendees to view pods in full screen. We always usually like to keep this one on. The default is that it's on. Again, this is what allows participants to make a pod full screen on their end. It won't change it for everybody. It's only on their end, so that's pretty easy to do. Activity ticker, this is what shows if someone is speaking in the attendees list, as well as gives you alerts about people joining or leaving. Allow attendees to use the hand raise function. We always keep that on. Display name, this really doesn't make much of a difference because the majority of people who are joining our meetings are logging in as guests. And so it won't, their name is going to show up the way that they put it in. This would only make a difference if they had Adobe accounts. Then you could, sort of first name, last name. Audio conference, again, we're not using an audio profile. We're just using the voice over IP. But as you can see, the default setting when you create a new meeting is that the participant microphone is turned off. So you have to go in, make sure that that box is ticked. I try to make sure I never miss it, but sometimes I do. And that's where to fix it if I've ever accidentally left it unchecked. Video. We always like a webcam preview, right? We like to make sure that we don't look terrible before we turn it on. So we leave that one unchecked.
Hey, Savannah?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I raised my hand. I guess it didn't get seen. Has
Oh,
anyone
my
else
apologies.
had situations where when they go and open up an Adobe room and you're trying to figure out why people aren't getting on for whatever reason? Eric and I have had experience where we have to manually go in and turn on, allowing participants to be able to use their microphones. Like literally 50% of the time, the classes, just started doing that recently. It's really weird. Has anyone else experienced that? And if you're typing, I can't see anything, so don't type.
Nobody's typing as of yet.
Okay.
Nobody's saying anything either.
Alrighty, I'll just shut up then.
No, it could be that I just missed it when I built the room, Kevin, or I'm wondering, did you switch any of your rooms over to enhanced audio or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was wondering if maybe that triggered it to reset.
And it's really random how it does it. And it's like we literally, like, first thing I'm doing when I'm opening the room is double check and make sure that's turned on. Because we have a situation where people are messaging us, hey, it's not giving me the ability to do that. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? And started digging around and saw that it was turned off in the settings for some reason. So it's just something that we always check nowadays.
Yeah, and it should persist from the last session, but...
Nope.
Very interesting. Yeah, well, now you know where to find it, so that's good. Oh, man. All right, so SharePod preferences. This one is you can turn on or off the ability for participants to draw on a whiteboard. For the majority of our rooms, we usually have this turned on, especially if we're doing, any activities where we want them to draw on something, right? Now, in a breakout room, this is always turned on. So if participants are in a breakout room, their ability to draw on a whiteboard is always active. This is really for any of those times outside of a breakout room. If you have a really chaotic group, you can always turn this off if things get out of hand.
Oh my gosh.
Take those rights away. And I always like to turn on the ability to export. So if they wanted to save the PDF or they wanted to save the picture, they could if they wanted to. I don't know that anyone ever has in the history of us using Adobe Connect, but at least they have the option. Attendee pod, again, I wish it would allow us to sort the names, but it'll only sort if they are logged in with an Adobe account, not if they log in as a guest. Chat pods, you can turn on or off the ability to chat privately, but I always leave it on because if you turn it off, they don't have the ability to send you a private message, right? And because we don't have the attendee list up on the screen, the chances of them actually messaging somebody else are almost impossible. Q&A pod we don't use too much, but you can turn off the submitter's name as well as even the presenter's name. So if you just wanted a question to just show up as anonymous, you would want to make sure that that's turned off. Having the presenter's name is kind of nice because then you know who answered your question. And it's nice for the presenters as well to keep track of who answered what. And closed captions is not something that we pay for, so we don't use that. All right, so those are the general preferences. Any other questions around the preferences in the room? This is really exciting stuff.
Yes, Savannah.
Yeah.
Back to the displaying name. Something I've always wanted is there gets to be a point to where I don't need them to see my name listed under my picture all the time. And only because there are oftentimes I'll hold up flip charts or 8.5 by 11s that I've written things on to show the participants. And having my big old name, like the billboard down at the bottom, obscures part of what they're able to see, and I have to move the thing around a lot.
Yeah.
Is there a way to just like not have that?
I wish there was an easier way to not have that, but what you could do is edit your information.
Okay.
And maybe just put like an underscore as your name. And then it would show up, let's see, it would show up, oh, hey, Minicam. Yeah, so it would show up, maybe, oh, I have to start sharing, but there you go. See, now it's just a
Boom.
little line.
Got you. Beautiful.
Just
beautiful.
change your own name. Yeah, there's no way to make it go away, but that's the hack.
I didn't know if it was something that was, automatic in the system, that it automatically did that and we weren't able to change it or not. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, cool. So now we've got a blank room. All of our settings are the way that we want it to be. One of the things I always like to make sure we turn on here is the host and presenter area. This engagement dashboard is always in the room by default, but I don't find that it's really helpful at all. The thing I find is the most helpful is just turning on the individual engagement that shows, green, yellow, or red in the attendees pod. Now, over the last few years, we've slowly just moved the attendees pod into the host and presenter area. I've found it really doesn't add much to the experience if it's on the screen. In fact, it just takes up a lot of real estate. So usually we hide it over there in the host and presenter area. We have, I don't know who pulled it up. Must have been you, Kev. You're the only other one oh, you're testing. I see.
Yeah.
All right.
My
So
apologies.
you've got video pods. Let's see. What other pods do we have? So a share pod. Share pod is interesting, and this is what the majority of the pods that we use in class are going to be, right, is a share pod. I'm just going to hide this for now, Kev. So with a share pod, you can share all types of things. You can share documents. You can make just a plain whiteboard. You can share your screen. Now, when it comes to uploading stuff, and Rich's original question about, how do I reload something after I've stopped sharing it? Usually you run into trouble if all you hit is this drop-down arrow, because it's going to show you recently shared items, and sometimes that might not be the current version that's saved there. If you actually click on the button itself that says document, then it's going to pull up more options. And any of the content that lives in any of our meetings is going to be under shared content. And again, it'll be under sales content. What class is it? Let's say, Rich, it was a delivery obsessed class and you lost your presentation. There it is. Or maybe it's a delivery class and you needed the customer retention plan document. There it is, right? So the trick when you're trying to reload stuff is don't hit the drop down arrow, because this, ideally, it should be the last thing that's there, but sometimes it's not for whatever reason. So always just go into shared content. That's where all of our content lives for our classrooms. Now, if you wanted to share something that you uploaded yourself, let's say like Kevin, for example, wanted to share that Rutan video, you would go into my content and you might share something that maybe you uploaded, like you got sick of the music that I put in the room, so maybe you wanted to upload your own music.
Never gonna
All
give
right, Rich.
you up.
Rich has to leave. Well, we can chat later too, Rich, if I can catch you up later another time. But you can upload anything that you've already uploaded, and I'll show you how to upload it to be under your content later. So a couple other things to note when it comes to share pods. How you upload things is important. So let's say we were doing an activity and I wanted to upload a worksheet for the group to work with. And for the sake of today, let's say it's this PDF. Now, when you upload a PDF, sometimes the formatting can be really goofy. PDFs in Adobe, I don't understand why, but sometimes they're just not great. So, you could turn on the drawing function and be able to edit and type into a PDF, but sometimes it's just not ideal. And it can be even trickier when people are sharing that same document, right? So for example, like now I'm not in full screen and it's really tiny. There's a lot of gray space around it. What I've found is the best way to do it is to take that PDF and instead of uploading it as a PDF, to actually save it, each one as a, export it as a JPEG. So if you open it up in whatever you have, Adobe or Preview, oh shoot, where did I save it? I don't know where I saved it. That's fine. Desktop. Okay. So when you save things as a JPEG, usually it'll only save one page at a time, but let me show you the difference. So on the right is a PDF version. And on the right is the PDF version. On the left is the JPEG version. So again, I've just found that the PDFs upload really funky. I find it's best to just make it a JPEG, and hopefully, yes, that's correct, Tiffany. So when you save it as a JPEG, you're doing that outside of Adobe. That's totally just, oh, I realize that my background on my computer is like the same background that I put in the room. So I apologize if that's confusing. Yeah, so I just open it up in, a PDF program like Preview, or you could use Adobe Reader and export it as a JPEG instead of a PDF. And that's all outside of Adobe.
Got it. Thank you.
Welcome. Good question. But yeah, so anytime you want somebody to draw on something, you can do it that way. And again, you're just uploading it as you're just putting it in as a share pod. You don't have to do whiteboard. Like, even though, yes, we are using the whiteboard function on a document, if you hit whiteboard, all you're going to get is a whiteboard, right? Like, it's just going to be a white screen. You can't upload an image to this. You can't put anything in the background. So, if you wanted to make something fancy, you could, let's say we made something really fancy in PowerPoint, and we could do the same thing, export this page that you made and export it as a JPEG, and current slide only. Let's see. Then we just upload the PDF that we made.
Hey, Savannah.
And now you have a beautiful image. Go ahead, Kev.
That one box that you checked, it allowed you to save all of these slides or just that one?
Yes.
If you do convert all of them into JPEG, does that allow you to scroll through them, or does it give you, or does it make this big picture of all the pages at once?
It will export it as each individual page.
Okay.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because that is my, I know it sounds insane, but that is my best practice for uploading our slide decks into Adobe. Because Adobe does not allow us to use custom fonts what I will do is I will take the slide deck, I will save them all as JPEGs, and I will just create a new slide deck using the JPEG of the previous slide, so that way
Gotcha.
it's always the proper font and you don't have to worry about Adobe reformatting or mucking up the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's here, I'll show you an example of that. So if you were to just upload those slides without doing, like I said, it's a slightly time-taking process. I'm not going to say I enjoy doing it, but I know that it works. When you just upload, the problem is, everything is in the Volkswagen font, and Adobe won't read the Volkswagen font. It's going to automatically switch everything over to Arial. So if you want your PowerPoint to look the way that you built it, either build it in a different font, which, the brand isn't going to be super excited about, or you can just create a separate slide deck, which is images of the other slide deck. So as you can see, when you upload something directly into the room, sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it also fails. And the other problem with that is that, let's say somebody hit stop sharing, you would have to re-upload this into the room again. So there you go. Here, before I get into those steps, I'll just show you. This is what happens to the slides when you just upload it. It might not look that different, but here, that's a good one. It's completely different than what it's supposed to look like. So let's say that you went through and you created the proper PowerPoint the way that you wanted it. If you want to upload into the back end of Adobe, this is how you do it. There you are. Okay, so you would go into content. Now, when I'm creating a room, usually what I'll do is I'll just make a new folder and I'll leave it in my area until the whole room is finished. So let's say it's test meeting content. So I just created a new folder. Again, I leave stuff under my content until I know it's done, and then I'll move it to the shared content folder. But this is where I can upload all of the content for that room. So if I want to make sure that the slides are in there, I just make sure whatever I title it here is what the title is going to be in the pod. So let's say, I don't know. And as far as when you're doing content, I almost never bother putting something custom in there, because nobody's ever navigating to just that piece of content. So now I've got that image in there. You can upload all of your stuff. And I recommend uploading it all in the back end, because again, it's saved on the back end. You don't have to worry. If somebody hits stop sharing, it's still in the back end. If you only upload it into the meeting, it only lives in the meeting. And if you created a new meeting, then there would be no way to kind of access those things. So once I've uploaded content, I can go into my content, training content, and there's that slide image that I just uploaded. Okay, I know it's a lot of words and it's a lot of steps. How are we doing so far?
I am doing good, but I have a question that this might not be the time for it, and I'm totally happy to accept that. But
Go
when
for it.
you export the slide deck to JPEGs, does it automatically catch every build? So let's say it's the sign posting slide. Or do you have to do something special to capture every click through that slide?
Okay. Really good
And
question.
we can talk about this some other day, but it is something that I wondered when you were going through that part.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So let's see, let me open up. Let's see. Let's go with product. There's some builds in product. Okay. Or do I not have the latest version on here because it's on the other computer? Maybe on the other computer. Okay, well, anyways, I'll find one. When I do the ones with builds, I think this should be one with, yeah, this is one with just the images. So when you save it as JPEGs, you don't get any builds at all. They're literally just pictures. So anything that you want to show up as a build, you just would, for example, these are just 3 separate slides, right? So they show up on each click, but it's not technically a build. Now you can still add in animations and stuff on top. So where's a good example of that one? Date. Which one?
Hunting and farming? Or
I know. Yes. Where is Oh, that is at the bottom of part 1. Okay, yeah. So for those.
So that means at this point, because you know this, you now create them this way.
Yes.
You don't even do builds anymore. At one point in time, you did them. Adobe Connect started acting wrong about it and skipping slides. So now this is what you do.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Here it is. Okay. So for the ones with builds, if I built, let's say the original version has builds in it, I will just copy and paste like I know it's in there somewhere. It's just not loaded yet, but I will just copy and paste the image with of course, the one I try to show you doesn't show. I'll just copy and paste. So like, let's say there was an animation of an icon. Like in the new one, you would just put the shape that you wanted to animate on top of the image and create the animation and put it on top of this, right? So leave the animation until the JPEG version.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the final version that would have an animation in it, and that's what you upload. If that makes sense.
I think it makes sense enough since I'm not probably going to have to do it.
Yeah, probably. Hopefully you don't.
But I see that actually, I think what I should have asked is, do you even create these slides with builds anymore, or are you creating them one click at a time, so to speak, so that it is each slide? So
for
the answer is,
part,
it doesn't just translate and catch all of the clicks, so we can't use builds and expect them to be exported to JPEG.
I found that as long as it's few, right? So the biggest benefit to doing this, making them JPEGs and all of that is the file size. So product is a really good example because it's filled with pictures. And the file size of I wish I had it. I don't think I do on this. It might be on my other computer, but the original file size of the one without them being JPEGs was absolutely massive. Like this is only 46 megabytes. The other one was like 200 or like 300 megabytes. And so the larger the file size, the slower it's going to be in Adobe. And so by making them into JPEGs, it's helping to reduce that file size, helping it run faster in Adobe. So you can still use builds. And I've found that, by reducing the file size, like having a few little animations here and there are totally fine, and they seem to be working without too many problems. But the more you can eliminate and the smaller file size you can make your PowerPoint, the faster it's going to be, and the less trouble you're going to have. That was a really long-winded answer to your question, so I hope.
Thank you.
Helped.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you've uploaded some files, you've got a few things. Now you just want to create a layout. Let's say we're building a layout for a lobby, right? So maybe we want to have a little music over here. We want to have maybe PowerPoint over here. You can kind of make things the way you want. You can add in a poll. So let's say maybe we wanted to just add in a lighthearted little poll, like, what's your favorite food? You have the option with polls to make it multiple choice, multiple answers, or short answer. So multiple answers meaning you can select more than one thing. Short answer meaning people can just type in and whatever they put in. Now, remember, with this, you can't put in more than one. So once you say pizza and yams, you can't submit a second answer, but you can edit it. So you can make sure that it says jammed yams. Oops. And not just any old yams, specifically the jammed variety. Those were those are so. Oh, and Kimberly said donuts in the chat. Okay, so polls are pretty simple. Now, when it comes to polls, donuts. When it comes to polls, it will automatically default. The title of the pod is the question, but you could change it if you wanted to. You can change the title of any pod to whatever you want. Just know that it might not save as far as if you change it later. You can turn on and off broadcasting results. You can edit the poll. And in the top here as well, you can choose to view the votes, broadcast results, clear all answers, or create a new poll. We've used polls before. I think you guys are pretty comfortable with those. Files. We started using these a little more lately. FilePod is pretty cool. It allows you to upload a file that participants could then download if they wanted to. So maybe I wanted to make sure everyone got this PDF. PDFs function for just fine in here. So if I wanted everybody to have this PDF, I could upload it in here and they can download it. And maybe I don't want it to be titled this. Maybe I want it to say, click to download PDF.
Hey, Savannah?
Yeah.
Is this one of those points where what you said earlier comes into play where, let's say, for example, it was a link to DST. And if instead of having to put one in or build one for each one of your presentations by having it in the background in your files or whatever, you can just go in and click on it to add them to all of the classrooms or whatever that you're making. Does that make sense?
So it does. Now, let's say, okay, so you're saying a link to DST, meaning like a web link?
A link or, some, informational PDF. Like,
okay. An informational PDF. Yeah. So you could upload it on your end and it would always be in here, right? So I can share in the files pod anything that I have uploaded and shared in my content.
Gotcha.
Now, if I'm if I'm building out a template and I wanted that to be in every room that I was building with that template, I would make sure that I upload it before I create the other rooms from the template. Otherwise, once that room is created, you can't rewrite or you can't like send an update to the rooms that were created from the template. They're going to always, go based off of the template at the time they were created. So let's say if we wanted to update the PDF at the end of Delivery Obsessed, you'd have to go into each individual room and upload each one or update each one.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, so for the sake of keeping it simple, let's say that this was our whole layout. We had a poll, a file pod, some music, and let's throw in a chat pod for fun. Now let's say that this layout is a really good layout and I want to use this layout a number of times throughout the session. Like for example, how we have the PowerPoint layout and there's like 20 of them in every room. There's probably like 10. You can, when you go to hit a new layout, hit duplicate existing layout. And you know what, let me rename this one first. Instead of it being called layout, we'll call it layout 1. So when I go to duplicate a layout, I want to make this layout 2, but it's going to be an exact duplicate of layout 1. Now, if I just wanted to adjust it slightly, I could, right? So if I wanted to add in a notes pod on this one, that way the rest of it looks the same. And when you're flipping back and forth, you don't have to try to line these up to match perfectly. You can just duplicate that layout, adjust the one thing you want to change. Or you could create a brand new layout that has nothing in it. All right, so let's say, all right, so now we've got a couple layouts and you have the prepare mode button at the bottom. Now, this is a really helpful thing that allows you to make adjustments to the other layouts even while you're in a class or like while the class is running. So let's say, for example, let's say I was in layout 1 and I wanted to make sure that when we get to layout 2 that has the note pod there, maybe I wanted to make sure that the participants' names were already in that pod when we got there. I could turn on prepare mode, go into that room and put Kevin, Tiffany, Tim, and Kimberly in there. And, it'll show you if that pod is visible by the participants, right? So if it's something that's live, it's visible to attendees. So you probably don't want to mess with any of that because they're going to be able to see it. But only you will see what's in prepare mode. But that way, when you make the transition, all that stuff is already in the pod. It can also be helpful if, you need to upload something quickly in the background or fix something that might have been broken, or, maybe you wanted to get a head start on clearing things. That's what prepare mode is really good for. So let's see, is there anything else about layouts? There is the ability to lock layouts. I've grappled with this or not over the years, because when a layout is locked, then like, even if I click on a pod to move it, I can't, right? So there's minimal risk of moving stuff around. You can still hit stop sharing though, so it's not going to help that. But I've just always left them unlocked because, you know, guys can have some freedom to move stuff around. You can't add in a new pod or anything if they're locked. But if by some chance you're in a room and you're like, what the hell's wrong? I can't move or adjust any of these pods. It could be that maybe somehow it accidentally got clicked that it was locked. Reset to default. Not always a great thing to do, right? Because now it's going back to the way that the template was created, which means that nothing that I had in there. And wouldn't that be great, Tiffany, if there was an undo button? Nope, there is not. So you really never want to hit reset to default. Although, for the most part, any of the rooms I've created should be fine if you do that because I've created them from a template. But just for the sake of, just in case, just try not to hit it because it'll probably mess some stuff up. Okay, so layouts, pods. Oh, I know. The last thing I was going to show you about pods was custom pods. Now, when you go to, say, the Adobe website, they have there are custom pods available on Adobe. Now, I have already gone through and downloaded pretty much everything that is free and or usable with Adobe Connect. So all of these you can find under shared content, sales content, digital assets, Adobe custom pods. So this is where you'll find things like agree to disagree, that booster game I had for 1-3s, the clock, the countdown, the digital timer, the randomizer, Kimberly. So all of those are custom pods, and they all live in there. So if you ever wanted to use any custom pods or add in any additional custom pods, I'll show you one more time. It's under shared content, sales content, digital assets, custom pods, and all that there. Okay. So that's all there is to it. I've already done the headache of uploading that stuff into Adobe, so you don't have to worry about that. You can just pull any of the custom pods that you want from there. Let's see. Any other things with the custom pods? Oh, managing pods. This one, okay. For the most part, you'll probably never need to use this. But me, for example, when I'm building a room, chances are I will have probably created a bunch of pods and then not ended up using them in the final version of the room. So you can hit this button to select any of the unused pods. So these are pods that were created, but they don't actually live in any of the rooms. You can select them easily and then just hit trash so that way there's not all these extra things floating around when you go to, find a share pod or a note pod. It's only gonna, have stuff that's in the in the actual room and layouts. Okay, Rich Lee is calling me, which I can only assume is an Adobe Connect emergency. So let's take a quick 5-minute pause. I'll let you guys come up if you have any questions or anything that just doesn't make sense yet. We'll do a quick 5 minutes. Let me call Rich back real quick and make sure that the room isn't on fire. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Everyone immediately just went on mute. All right. So we'll do a quick 5 minutes and I'll be right back.